My name is Sabrina Collins. I'm 22 years old, and I never planned on moving back into my parents' house. Yet there I was, standing in the same narrow hallway where I'd spent 18 years learning how to be quiet, how to be useful, how not to take up too much space. The wallpaper hadn't changed. Pale beige, faint floral print, peeling slightly near the corners. The house still smelled like lemon cleaner and something perpetually overcooked. It was as if time had paused here, waiting patiently for me to return so it could remind me exactly who I was supposed to be. Temporary, I told myself. This is just temporary. The job hunt didn't take long. Thankfully. Within a week, I landed a position at Reynolds Marketing Group. Junior account coordinator, decent starting salary, performance bonuses written clearly into the contract. For the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen. I could breathe. That evening, over Mom's pot roast, I shared the news. I figured I'd stay here maybe 3 months, I said, cutting into my potatoes. Save up, then get my own apartment downtown. The clinking of forks against plates stopped. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks, the silent conversation that always meant I was about to be outvoted before I even knew there was a debate. Moving out, Mom repeated, setting her fork down slowly, too slowly. Sabrina, she continued, her voice softening into concern, you know I can only work part-time at the clinic because of my hip problems. Dad cleared his throat, that familiar warning sound. And things aren't great at the distribution center, he added. Rumors of layoffs. Mom sighed. We could really use your help with the bills. You wouldn't even have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense. I stared at my half-eaten pot roast, feeling the walls inch closer. They weren't wrong, and they were my parents. I guess I could stay longer, I heard myself say. Life slipped into routine after that. I worked. I came home. I paid the bills. Mom made dinner. Dad watched the news. It was manageable, almost comfortable, until last weekend. Victoria arrived. My older sister, 7 years my senior, swept into the house with her husband Derek and their children, Harper and Mason, like visiting royalty, returning to a devoted court. Oh, my precious angels, Mom cooed, scooping up Harper while Dad lifted Mason onto his shoulders. Victoria barely had to speak. They hung on her every word. Asked about her garden, her yoga class, what new words Mason had learned. I stood in the doorway, invisible. Sabrina, be a dear and put on some coffee, Mom called, without looking at me. Watching them laugh together, something old stirred in my chest, something familiar. It had always been this way. Victoria was the star. I was the supporting character who brought refreshments. I remembered being 11 years old, standing at this same kitchen table, holding up my straight A report card. That's nice, Sabrina, Mom had said, barely glancing up from her phone. Victoria, honey, tell me again which graduate programs you're applying to. Every dinner revolved around Victoria's achievements, her internships, her future, her potential. When she got accepted to Northwestern, Mom cried. Dad promised they'd make it work, no matter what. A week after Victoria left for Chicago, they sat me down. We need to tighten our belts, Dad said seriously. And tighten them we did. No new phones. Goodwill clothes. Practical Christmas gifts. But Victoria never went without. She needs to focus on her studies, Mom would say, writing another check. I learned early that if I wanted anything, I'd have to earn it myself. At 15, I joined every club, every competition. I studied until my hands cramped. Scholarships became survival, not ambition. I earned a full ride to State University. My parents' relief was visible. Victoria graduated, married Derek, had Harper, then Mason. Their perfect daughter, their perfect family. Now, every visit followed the same pattern. Sabrina, you'll watch the kids while we run out, right? Victoria would say, already grabbing her purse. Mom's hip, Dad's rest. Always an excuse. I told myself it was just one weekend a month. Then a year passed. And then the phone rang. Victoria was crying. Derek's startup had collapsed. No savings, no rent money. Of course you can stay, Mom said instantly. My stomach dropped. If they're moving in, I said carefully, maybe I should get my own apartment. You'd think I'd suggested burning the house down. We're family, Dad said firmly. They arrived the next weekend. I moved into the storage room. My bedroom became the kids' playroom. The message was clear. And as I lay in my too small bed that night, listening to the chaos below, I realized something terrifying. Temporary had quietly turned into permanent. The first night after Victoria and her family officially moved in, I lay awake staring at the low ceiling of what used to be our storage room. The room smelled faintly of dust and old cardboard. My twin bed was pushed so close to the wall that I had to turn sideways just to slip under the blanket. Every sound carried through the thin walls: Harper's giggles, Mason's shrill squeals, the TV downstairs blaring some renovation show Victoria liked to watch at full volume. I told myself I just needed time to adjust. That was the lie I clung to for the first few weeks. Morning started earlier now. I woke up to the sound of little feet pounding down the hallway, the slam of cabinet doors, Victoria's voice already sharp with irritation before 9 a.m. "Harper, stop that! Mason, don't touch that!" she'd call half-heartedly, never leaving the couch. I got ready for work in the tiny bathroom, stepping over toy cars and sticky fingerprints on the mirror. By the time I grabbed my bag and headed out, I already felt exhausted, like I'd lived an entire day before my real one even began. At first, the babysitting requests came dressed as favors. "Sabrina, could you watch them for just 10 minutes while I take a shower?" "Sabrina, I need to run to the store real quick. You don't mind, right?" I minded, I just didn't say it. Because every time I hesitated, Mom was there with her concerned sigh. "Victoria's under so much stress right now." Or Dad with his measured tone. "It's only temporary." Temporary. The word echoed through my head like a bad joke. By the second week, the requests weren't requests anymore. I'd come home from work and find Victoria already halfway out the door, mascara fresh, purse over her shoulder. "Oh, good, you're home," she'd say brightly. "We're meeting friends for dinner. The kids already had snacks. They'll need dinner around 7. And just like that, she was gone. No asking, no waiting for a response. The first Friday it happened, I stood frozen in the doorway, still wearing my work heels, watching her car pull out of the driveway. Mom peeked into the kitchen a moment later. "You're okay watching them, right?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded and heated up chicken nuggets. Weekends became something I dreaded. Victoria and Derek announced their plans casually over Friday dinner, like they were discussing the weather. Brunch with friends Saturday. Movie date Sunday afternoon. Mom and Dad somehow always had errands, church events, or sudden visits to relatives scheduled for the exact same hours. And so I became the default. Saturday mornings meant cartoons blaring at full volume, crumbs ground into the carpet, Mason throwing tantrums because I cut his sandwich wrong, Harper asking endless questions while tugging on my sleeve. I loved my niece and nephew. That was the cruelest part. But love didn't mean obligation, and no one seemed to understand or care about the difference. One afternoon, after Mason tried to color on my bedroom wall for the third time, I finally snapped. "Hey, no drawing in here," I said, grabbing the crayon. Victoria barely looked up from her phone. "They're just kids, Sabrina. Relax." "This is my room," I said, my voice tight. "Or what's left of it." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're so uptight lately." Uptight. That word followed me everywhere. Uptight for wanting quiet. Uptight for wanting boundaries. Uptight for wanting a life that didn't revolve around children I hadn't chosen to have. At night, I lay awake listening to Baby Shark playing on repeat downstairs, wondering how I'd let this happen. The utility bills arrived at the end of the month. I stood in the kitchen staring at the numbers, my hands shaking. Water nearly double, electricity off the charts, gas higher than I'd ever seen. My paycheck, once something I was proud of, was vanishing into thin air. That night at dinner, I cleared my throat. "So, the bills," I began carefully. "They've doubled since last month. I can't keep covering everything by myself." Victoria's fork clattered onto her plate. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "After everything Derek and I are going through?" "I'm not saying you're not struggling," I said. "I'm just saying we need to figure out something fair." "Unbelievable," she scoffed. "You're being selfish." Mom jumped in immediately. "Family helps family, Sabrina." Dad nodded. "This isn't the time to count pennies." I looked down at my plate, appetite gone. "Fine." I swallowed my words and paid the bills. A week later, Derek got a job. Not as good as his old one, but still, a paycheck. I hoped things would improve. They didn't. Victoria complained constantly. "I never get a break. I'm alone with the kids all day." And somehow, her solution was always me. The favors snowballed. An hour turned into an evening. An evening turned into entire weekends. They stopped asking altogether. One Sunday night, after 12 straight hours of childcare, I sat at the dinner table, barely holding myself together. "I'm really tired," I said quietly. "This isn't working for me." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mom patted her hand. "Don't worry, honey. This is good practice for Sabrina. She'll need to know how to handle kids when she's a mother someday." Training. That's what I was to them. Free labor. Preparation. A placeholder. They went back to their conversation like I hadn't spoken. I sat there, invisible once again, something inside me shifting, not breaking, awakening. The breaking point didn't arrive with a scream or a slammed door. It came quietly, disguised as another family emergency. I was washing dishes after dinner when Mom's phone rang from the living room. I recognized the ringtone instantly. Victoria. Mom always used a softer tone when she answered her calls, like she was afraid of startling her. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom said, "don't cry. Tell me what happened." I froze, my hands still submerged in soapy water. Through broken sobs, Victoria explained that Derek's startup hadn't just stumbled. It had collapsed. Overnight. Investors pulled out, accounts frozen, no severance, no warning. They couldn't afford their rent anymore. Could we maybe stay with you for a while?" Victoria asked, her voice cracking just enough to sound helpless. "Of course," Mom said without hesitation. "We'll make room." Just like that. No discussion, no pause, no glance in my direction. My stomach dropped. I stepped into the living room, drying my hands on a towel. "If they're moving in," I said carefully, "maybe this would be a good time for me to finally get my own apartment." The room went silent. Mom stared at me like I'd suggested abandoning a newborn on the roadside. "Sabrina, don't be ridiculous," she said sharply. "There's plenty of room." "We're family," Dad added. "We stick together in hard times." Hard times, apparently, only applied to certain people. Victoria and Derek arrived the following weekend with 3 cars full of belongings. 3. I watched from the front window as they unloaded box after box, toys spilling out like a physical manifestation of how much space they were about to take up in our lives. That Saturday morning, Mom knocked on my door. "Well," she said brightly, "we need to rearrange some things." An hour later, I was carrying my clothes down the hall into what used to be the storage room. The smallest room in the house. Barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. "My old room?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Oh, the kids need space to play," Mom said, as if it were obvious. "You understand." I nodded. Because that's what I did. By Sunday night, the house felt unrecognizable. Harper and Mason treated every room like their personal playground. They ran up and down the hallway screaming, while Victoria lounged on the couch watching HGTV, her voice loud as she talked over the TV to friends on the phone. After work, all I wanted was quiet. Instead, I got chaos. Baby Shark echoed through the walls. Toys littered every surface. My work papers were scattered across my bed after Mason burst into my room for the 10th time that evening. "Hey, please don't come in here without knocking," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "They're just kids," Victoria said dismissively. "You're too sensitive." Derek spent his days job hunting at the kitchen table, scrolling through LinkedIn with a permanently worried expression. "The market's brutal," he'd say, "but something will come up." I nodded, even though resentment simmered beneath the surface. At night, I lay in my too small bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house buzz with noise and movement that never seemed to stop. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a holding pen. The first utility bill after they moved in hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at the total, my heart racing. Almost double. I checked my bank account and felt panic creep in. The money I'd been saving, money meant for my future, was evaporating. That night at dinner, I finally spoke up. "The bills have doubled," I said quietly. "I can't keep paying everything on my own." Victoria's fork slammed onto her plate. "You're seriously complaining about money right now?" "I'm not complaining," I said. "I just think we need to figure out something fair." "How selfish can you be?" she snapped. "Derek and I have lost everything." "Victoria's right," Mom chimed in. "Family doesn't nickel and dime each other." Dad nodded solemnly. "This isn't the time to be difficult." Difficult. That was what wanting fairness made me. I looked down at my plate, my appetite gone. "Fine," I murmured. "Never mind." I paid the bills. A week later, Derek got a job. Lower pay, longer hours. But it was something. I allowed myself a flicker of hope. It died quickly. Victoria complained constantly about being alone with the kids. And the solution every time was me. By the time I crawled into bed each night, exhaustion wrapped around me like a second skin. I started to realize something terrifying. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was my life, unless I changed it. I started dreading the sound of my own front door. Every evening, as I pulled into the driveway after work, my chest tightened, not from traffic or deadlines, but from the knowledge waiting inside. Noise, demands, expectation, a version of myself that only existed to serve. Somewhere along the way, my life had been quietly reassigned. Monday through Friday, I worked full-time at Reynolds Marketing, navigating client calls, campaign metrics, and deadlines that actually mattered. I liked my job. I was good at it. But lately, even there, exhaustion followed me like a shadow. Because when I clocked out, my second shift began. It started small, the way these things always do. Sabrina, could you watch the kids for an hour while I run to Whole Foods? Just 15 minutes, I promise. I need a bath. I haven't had one in days. Each request came wrapped in just enough helplessness to make refusal feel cruel. And every time I hesitated, Mom would appear, leaning against the counter, voice soft but pointed. You know Victoria's under a lot of stress. Or Dad, arms crossed, tone calm but final. It's what family does. Family. That word had become a weapon. By the time I realized what was happening, the pattern was set. Victoria didn't ask anymore. She announced. I'd walk in the door and find her already dressed to go out, purse in hand, keys jingling. Oh, good, you're home, she'd say, relieved. The kids already had their snacks. They'll need dinner around 7. We'll be back by 10. Sometimes she'd be gone before I could respond. Mom and Dad were suddenly very busy on weekends, visiting relatives, running errands, church events that somehow always overlapped with Victoria's plans. So it was me. Again. Saturday mornings meant waking up to cartoons blaring through the walls, Mason screaming because Harper touched his toy, Harper crying because Mason looked at her wrong. I cooked, I cleaned, I mediated fights. I wiped spills and tears and sticky fingers. By Sunday night, I was drained in a way sleep didn't fix. One weekend, after Victoria and Derek had left for yet another brunch date, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the mess around me. Crayons on the floor, crumbs in the sheets, a small footprint smudged on my laptop screen. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, quietly. That night at dinner, I forced myself to speak. I need to talk to you all, I said, setting my fork down. My hands were shaking. Victoria looked annoyed. What now? I'm exhausted, I said. This situation with the childcare, it's not working for me. The room went still. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? That you don't want to spend time with your niece and nephew? That's not what I said, I replied carefully. I'm saying this can't keep falling on me without discussion. Mom immediately reached over and patted Victoria's hand. Don't worry, honey, she said. Then she turned to me, smiling faintly. This is good practice for you, Sabrina. You'll need to know how to handle kids when you become a mother someday. Training. That's what this was to them. Not my time, not my life. Preparation. They went back to eating, the conversation shifting seamlessly to Victoria's day, Derek's job, Harper's preschool progress. I sat there, invisible once again, and something settled in my chest. Not sadness. Clarity. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Victoria and Derek seemed to take my complaint as a challenge, finding even more reasons to leave. They'd be waiting by the door when I got home, coats on, kids already corralled. Meeting friends at that new tapas place downtown, Victoria would say breezily. Thanks, Sabrina. Weekends became something I feared. I woke up on Saturdays with a knot in my stomach, knowing exactly how the next 48 hours would unfold. Disney movies, chicken nuggets, tantrums, messes, noise. All while my own life sat on pause. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was at my desk at Reynolds Marketing, staring blankly at a campaign proposal, when my friend Amanda leaned against my cubicle wall. You look dead, she said lightly. I laughed, though it came out hollow. I feel it. She studied me for a moment. Hey, want to do something fun this weekend? I blinked. Fun? A bunch of us are going to Aspen Ridge, she continued. Quick weekend getaway. Leave Saturday morning, come back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect. For the first time in months, something sparked inside me. Skiing, mountains, silence. Freedom. I'd love that, I heard myself say before fear could intervene. All week I carried that feeling with me, a fragile bubble of excitement I didn't dare examine too closely. Friday evening, I closed my bedroom door and started packing. A duffel bag, warm sweaters, thermal socks. I was smiling. That was when Victoria appeared in my doorway. What are you doing? She asked, eyes narrowing. Packing, I replied casually. Going skiing with friends this weekend. Her expression darkened. You need to cancel. I froze, then laughed, thinking she was joking. I'm serious, she said. Derek and I are going to Aunt Patricia's 60th birthday party in Riverside. Mom and Dad are coming too. It took a second for the implication to land. Oh, I said slowly. And you'll need to stay here with Harper and Mason. Something inside me hardened. No, I said. Victoria blinked. What did you just say? I said no, I repeated, my voice steady. I have plans. Her face flushed red. You're being completely unreasonable. I kept folding my clothes, hands shaking, not with fear, but with anger. No, I said again. What's unreasonable is assuming I'll cancel my life at a moment's notice for yours. She stormed out, shouting for Mom and Dad. I kept packing. For the first time, I didn't stop. The sound of heavy footsteps filled the hallway. I didn't look up from my duffel bag as the door to my room swung open wider than it already was. The space felt even smaller as Mom, Dad, Victoria, and Derek crowded inside, their presence pressing in on me from every angle. Mom crossed her arms first. That was always her signal. What is this nonsense about you going skiing? She demanded. I zipped the bag slowly, deliberately, then turned to face them. Exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to Aspen Ridge with friends. Victoria scoffed. You can't. We already told you. We have Aunt Patricia's party. No, I corrected her. You have Aunt Patricia's party. Dad frowned. Sabrina, this isn't the time for selfish decisions. I felt something strange settle over me. Calm, clear. Why am I just hearing about this party now? I asked. Why wasn't I included in any of the planning? Mom hesitated. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate answer. Victoria jumped in. Because we all discussed it and decided this made the most sense. You stay with the kids. We go to the party. You all discussed it, I repeated slowly, without me. Silence. Well, you can't exactly bring small children to a sophisticated event, Victoria sniffed. Aunt Patricia said no kids. I hoisted the duffel bag onto my shoulder. Sounds like a you problem. Derek finally spoke, his voice tight. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what it sounds like, I said, meeting his eyes. They're your kids. If you can't bring them, don't go. Or hire a babysitter. A babysitter? Victoria screeched. With what money? I shrugged. Not my problem. Mom's face hardened. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? I took a breath. Let me make something very clear. I am done being your free babysitter. I'm done having my weekends taken without permission. I'm done being treated like my life doesn't matter. Victoria stared at me like I'd slapped her. The silence stretched. Then she burst into dramatic sobs, covering her face. Derek muttered, unbelievable. Dad shook his head. Selfish, absolutely selfish. Mom delivered the final blow, her voice sharp and triumphant. If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't bother coming back. Something unexpected happened. I laughed. Not a nervous giggle, a real laugh. They all stared at me. You know what's funny? I said, wiping at my eyes. I've been dreaming about moving out for months. I just didn't have the courage. So thank you for finally pushing me. Get out, Victoria shrieked. Gladly. I pulled out my phone and called Amanda, putting it on speaker. Hey, I said, is that offer to crash at your place still good? Of course, she replied instantly. You want to come now? Yes, I said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I spent the next 15 minutes grabbing everything I could fit into my car. Clothes, documents, personal items. They watched from the hallway, stunned, as if they couldn't quite believe I was actually leaving. When the trunk was full, I walked back inside. Oh, I added calmly, one more thing. Since I won't be living here anymore, I won't be paying any bills either. Mom's face went pale. But the utilities, the groceries. Not my problem, I said. And I walked out. The drive to Amanda's place was a blur of adrenaline and relief. My phone buzzed nonstop. Angry messages, guilt-filled paragraphs, missed calls. I ignored them all. The next morning, Amanda and I drove to Aspen Ridge. For the first time in what felt like forever, I spent a weekend doing exactly what I wanted. We skied, we laughed, we drank hot chocolate by the fire. No guilt, no noise, no responsibility that wasn't mine. When I came back Sunday night, I opened my laptop and searched for apartments. By Wednesday, I signed a lease. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't unpack anything. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, eating takeout straight from the container, listening to the sound of nothing. No cartoons blaring through thin walls, no tiny feet pounding down the hallway, no voices calling my name like it belonged to them. Just silence. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the wide living room window, warming the hardwood floors. I stood there with a mug of coffee, still hot by the time I finished it, and felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Peace. The messages started immediately. Mom first. How could you abandon your family like this? Then Victoria. The kids keep asking where you are. They're confused and hurt. Hope you're proud of yourself. Dad's texts were shorter. Your mother is very upset. You need to make this right. I read them all. I didn't respond to any of them. Without my paycheck covering utilities, groceries, and just this once expenses, their reality shifted fast. The guilt trips intensified. Accusations morphed into pleas. Pleas turned sharp again when I stayed silent. A week later, Mom called. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sabrina, she said sharply, I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Patricia's party was a disaster. I closed my eyes. Mom, stop. Don't you dare. I'm done, I said calmly. I'm done being treated like a servant in my own family. I'm done paying for everyone else's choices. I'm done being invisible. There was a pause. Then her tone softened, syrupy. Honey, we need you. The bills this month, we're struggling. No, I said. You'll figure it out, just like I always did. I hung up. Then I blocked her number. Dad, Victoria, even Derek. I blocked them all. It felt terrifying and liberating. The days that followed were quiet in the best way. I unpacked slowly, choosing where everything went. I bought plants and placed them on every windowsill. I decorated with artwork I liked, not what anyone else thought was appropriate. I started going to yoga on Wednesday nights, joined a book club, cooked meals just for myself. At work, something shifted. Without constant exhaustion weighing me down, I focused, excelled. My boss noticed. Whatever you're doing differently, she said after promoting me to senior account manager, keep doing it. I smiled all the way home. 3 months passed. Through a friend of a friend, I heard updates. Victoria and Derek moved into a smaller apartment across town. Victoria went back to work. The kids were in daycare. Mom returned to full-time work despite her hip. Dad took on overtime. They were managing. Just like they would have if I'd never existed. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe, working on my laptop, I watched a woman with 2 small children struggle at the table next to me. Crumbs everywhere. Loud voices, exhaustion etched into her face. For a moment, instinct tugged at me. To help, to step in, to make someone else's burden lighter. Then I took a sip of my latte and kept working. Her children, her responsibility. Just like my life was finally mine. Last week, Amanda invited me to a gallery opening. That's where I met Connor. He was kind, funny, asked questions, and actually listened to the answers. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. We're getting coffee next Saturday, and I'm excited. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder about my family. But I don't wonder enough to unblock them. Maybe someday we'll rebuild something healthier. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'm done sacrificing myself to earn love. For the first time in my 22 years, I'm not invisible. I'm free.